You pull up to the light in the car next to you, some 10-year-old sedan that looks like it has been through 3 owners, just pulls away clean and quiet while your engine sits there sputtering like it is begging for mercy. You glance at your gas gauge and it has already dropped a quarter tank since this morning. And the worst part is, you just paid the dealership $400 last month for a tune-up that did absolutely nothing. Here is the frustration nobody wants to say out loud. You are pouring money into an engine that never feels as strong as it should, and every time you fix one thing, another thing breaks, and the fuel bill keeps climbing no matter how gently you drive. You have been lied to. The dealerships, the service writers, the glossy owner's manual, the modern shops with their scan tools and their upsells, they have all been quietly pushing you toward the most expensive answer to every problem, because the cheap answers, the ones the old mechanics used in their driveways for 50 years, would put half their service department out of business. They told you premium fuel fixes everything. They told you only OEM parts will do. They told you any modification voids your warranty and ruins your engine. And meanwhile, you are bleeding money, your engine still hesitates, and nothing actually changes. So today I am going to walk you through 10 cheap, hands-on tricks that the manufacturers and the EPA would rather you never try. The kind of stuff that sits in a legal gray zone because it works too well, breaks emissions rules technically, or simply embarrasses the official solution. We are going to split this into 2 halves. The bolt-on and underhood tricks that wake up your power and your fuel economy immediately, and the fuel, ignition, and tuning tricks that protect your engine for the long haul. And at the end, I am going to give you the one prevention habit that locks every single one of these gains in place for years. Part 1. The bolt-on and intake tricks that the factory deliberately choked from the showroom floor. This matters first, because this is where your engine is losing the most power and the most fuel right now. Every time you turn the key, and you can fix it this weekend in your own driveway with a socket set. Here is what most people instinctively do when their car feels sluggish. They throw premium 93 octane in the tank, they pay a shop $200 for an induction service, and they cross their fingers. It feels right. It feels like you are taking care of the engine. But here is the truth. Your engine is not starving for octane. Your engine is being strangled by the airbox, the intake silencer, the catalytic converter restriction, and an ECU tune that was written to pass emissions in California, not to make your car run its best in Ohio or Yorkshire. From the factory, most modern engines are giving up between 12 and 25 horsepower, just from intake and exhaust restriction alone, and you are paying for that loss every time you press the gas pedal because the engine has to work harder, pull more fuel, and spin faster to do the same job. The old mechanics knew this. They called it letting the engine breathe. A choked engine drinks fuel. A breathing engine sips it. So here's the first trick, and it is the cheapest one. Pop your airbox open and look at the intake snorkel, that black plastic tube that runs from the grill to the filter. On most cars, there is a resonator or a silencer pod hanging off it, sometimes 2. Pull it. It is held on by 2 screws or a clamp. That single 5-minute job typically nets you 2 to 4 miles per gallon on the highway and a noticeable bump in throttle response because you have just removed a deliberate restriction the factory installed to make the engine quieter, not stronger. Trick 2, drop in a high-flow drop-in filter. Not a cone filter that sucks hot engine bay air, a flat panel filter that fits the stock box. $35, 10 minutes, and it flows around 30% more air than the paper element. Trick 3, and this is where it gets legally interesting, a high-flow catalytic converter or a test pipe on an off-road vehicle. I am not telling you to run it on the street where it is illegal under federal law to remove emissions equipment, but I am telling you that the stock cat on a high-mileage car is often partially clogged, creating up to 3 or 4 psi of back pressure, and that back pressure is choking your exhaust stroke and costing you real horsepower and real miles per gallon. Trick 4, a cat back exhaust with a straight-through muffler, 2 1/4 inch piping on a 4-cylinder, 2.5 on a 6, mandrel-bent. You will feel it the second you start it. Now, before we move on, the universal prevention tip for everything in this first half: clean your mass airflow sensor, every oil change, with a dedicated MAF cleaner spray, never brake cleaner, never carburetor cleaner, $6 a can. A dirty MAF lies to the ECU about how much air is coming in, and the ECU compensates by dumping extra fuel, and you lose 3 to 5 miles per gallon without ever seeing a check engine light. Part 2, and this is a completely different problem, technically distinct from anything we just covered. The first half was about airflow and mechanical restriction. This half is about combustion itself, fuel, spark, and the chemistry happening inside your cylinders thousands of times per minute. You can have the best intake and exhaust in the world, but if the fire inside the cylinder is weak, incomplete, or mistimed, you are burning money and slowly killing your engine at the same time. Here is the universal mistake almost every driver makes in this second context. They run whatever fuel is cheapest, they leave the spark plugs in until the car starts misfiring, and they never touch the ignition timing because the owner's manual told them it is non-adjustable. The catastrophic consequence builds slowly. Incomplete combustion dumps unburned fuel into your oil, thinning it out, dropping its viscosity from a proper 30 weight to something closer to 20 over 20,000 miles. That thin oil cannot protect your bearings, and around the 80,000 mile mark you start hearing a faint knock on cold starts. Ignore it another 10,000 miles and you are looking at a $4,000 rebuild for what started as a $15 set of spark plugs and a tank of the right fuel. The old guys called it running dirty, and they fixed it for almost nothing. So here are the tricks for the combustion side. Method 1, gap your spark plugs yourself and go one step colder if you have a high mileage engine that runs hot. Factory gap is usually somewhere between 0.040 and 0.044 of an inch, but on a tired engine with weaker compression, closing the gap to 0.035 gives you a more reliable spark under load and eliminates the high RPM misfire that is quietly cooking your catalytic converter. $3 a plug, 15 minutes a cylinder. Method 2, run a fuel system cleaner with PEA polyethyramine once every 5,000 miles. Not the cheap stuff at the checkout counter, the concentrated bottle that costs around $12. PEA is the only chemistry that actually strips carbon off the back of intake valves on a direct injection engine, and carbon buildup on those valves is the single biggest reason your engine is losing 4 to 7 miles per gallon by the time it hits 60,000 miles. Most people pay a shop $400 for a walnut blast, but actually a $12 bottle run through 3 consecutive tanks does 80% of the same job. Method 3, and this is the one the manufacturers really do not want you doing a handheld tuner or a piggyback module on the OBD 2-port. You plug it in, you select the 91 octane tune or the towing tune or the economy tune, and you have just rewritten the fuel and timing maps that the factory deliberately softened to meet a fleet emissions average. On a turbocharged engine, you'll pick up 30 to 50 horsepower and 1 to 2 miles per gallon. On a naturally aspirated engine, you'll pick up 10 to 15 horsepower and smoother throttle response, $200 to $400 one time. And yes, it technically voids your powertrain warranty. And yes, it can fail an emissions sniff test in certain counties, which is exactly why the dealer will never tell you it exists. And here is the one that sits at the very edge of legal and that the old-timers swore by: a small, controlled shot of water methanol injection on a forced induction engine. A gallon of 50/50 distilled water and methanol misted into the intake under boost cools the charge air by 60 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, lets you run more timing safely, and effectively raises your octane rating by 4 to 6 points without paying premium prices at the pump. The mechanism is pure thermodynamics. Cooler, denser air burns more completely, and more complete combustion means more power and less heat soak into your pistons and rings. A basic kit is around $200, and it will add years to a turbocharged engine that would otherwise be detonating itself to death on summer pump gas. Part 3. Prevention. Here is the one habit that locks in every single gain from the last 10 minutes and keeps your engine running like this for the next 100,000 miles. Change your oil every 5,000 miles with a full synthetic that meets your manufacturer's exact specification, and every single oil change, drop in 1 bottle of a high-quality ester-based oil additive, something with zinc and phosphorus, what the old guys call ZDDP. The reason this works mechanically is simple. Every trick I just gave you increases cylinder pressure, increases combustion temperature, and increases the load on your bearings, your rings, and your cam lobes. Modern oils have had their zinc content cut down to protect catalytic converters, which leaves your flat tappet cams and your bearing surfaces exposed to metal-on-metal contact at startup. A $6 bottle of ZDDP additive at every oil change restores the sacrificial anti-wear layer the factory took away, and it will save you somewhere between $800 and $3,000 a year in deferred repairs, premature wear, and lost fuel economy. Pour it in right before you add fresh oil, run the engine for 30 seconds, and you are done. Now, here is the new problem you are going to run into the second you start doing all of this. When you open up the intake, clean the valves, run a tune, and let your engine actually breathe and burn the way it was meant to, you are going to start noticing a slight vibration at idle, or a faint exhaust drone at highway cruise, or a check engine light for a downstream oxygen sensor reading lean because the rest of your sensors, your motor mounts, and your exhaust hangers were all calibrated for the choked, lazy version of your engine. If you are already dealing with that vibration, that drone, or a stubborn P420 or P171 code after waking your engine up, drop a comment below and tell me which one you are fighting, because the next video is going to walk you through exactly how to diagnose and fix every one of those post-mod gremlins for under $50 without ever setting foot in a dealership. Subscribe so you do not miss it, because once you go down this road, you are going to want the rest of the playbook. Take care of your engine, and it will take care of you for another 200,000 miles. Before you close this video, though, there are a few last things worth saying out loud, because the people who do not say them are usually the ones selling you a tune for $400 in a handshake. Every single modification we talked about today exists in a legal gray zone for a reason, and that reason traces back to the Clean Air Act of 1963 and its much sharper teeth, the 1990 amendments, which made it a federal offense under Section 203 to tamper with or remove any emissions control device on a vehicle operated on public roads. The EPA fines start at around $4,700 per violation per vehicle, and in 2020 they hit a diesel shop in Indiana called Diesel Brothers with an $850,000 penalty for delete kits, which tells you exactly how serious the enforcement has gotten in the last 5 years. California Air Resources Board, what everyone calls CARB, is even stricter, and in states like California, New York, Colorado, and increasingly Washington, your car gets sniffed at a tailpipe every 1 or 2 years, and a missing catalytic converter or a flashed ECU without a CARB executive order number will fail you instantly. So who is this video actually for? It is for the person with a closed course track car, a project vehicle registered as off-road, a farm truck, a show car, or someone living in one of the roughly 20 states that still do not require emissions testing at all, places like Florida, Michigan, South Carolina, Arkansas, Mississippi, and most of the Dakotas and Mountain West. If you are in one of those states, you have a legitimate window to wake your engine up without a single legal worry beyond the federal statutes, which are almost never enforced against individual owners, only against shops and manufacturers selling the parts. The other thing nobody tells you is that doing 5 of these mods is dramatically better than doing all 10. Stack a cold air intake, a catback exhaust, a conservative 91 octane tune, a walnut blast at 60,000 miles, and ZDDP at every oil change, and you will pick up somewhere between 22 and 38 horsepower on a typical 2-liter Turbo 4, gain 3 to 5 miles per gallon on the highway, and extend your engine's useful life by an estimated 40 to 70,000 miles based on the Blackstone Labs oil analysis data published in 2022. That is the sweet spot. Past that, you are chasing diminishing returns and inviting the gremlins we already talked about. Be smart, be selective, and your engine will reward you for decades.